Right. Welcome everyone to our weekly All Team Tactical. We're going to use this time to sync up on the work going on around BCard, eliminate blockers, and prioritize our work. In case you forgot what we do, we help purpose-driven communities use Web3 tooling to generate revenue and engagement. Really want to emphasize that purpose-driven. I think we've seen, just like sometimes people forget how profit-driven everything is, and I think in the last kind of week we've seen how everything is kind of driven by profits, which we might discuss a little bit more in the discussion. But on the lag metric side, we have 852 transaction volume, 2 weekly transacting users, which means that we're getting a lot from a couple of users. I think something that we could probably do more of, but it's not our focus at the moment. 0 new users and 11 communities deployed. It's not quite the last day, but this last like 24 hours to vote on our snapshot. So go ahead and vote if you haven't. Sprinkles, I saw that you did vote, and your vote went through, which means that probably there's some other issue with that user who is having trouble. So thank you for voting and checking it. But did you have any issues actually? Now that I brought it up, did you have any issues voting through the app?
No issues at all. Nope.
Okay.
It was fine.
Worked okay
I am
for me
wondering
today as well.
Okay, I am wondering if that person doesn't actually have any votable tokens, which is weird because they probably should, but that's one thing I didn't check. And I think in the past, I had tried that with an app, and it was missing some, like it allowed me to vote, but then I didn't have any votable tokens, so it came back and said like, hey, you actually can't vote. So maybe that's the mistake.
What happened to me when I didn't have enough tokens or didn't have tokens? That's the message that I got. Now that I do, it let me vote. So it works perfect.
Okay. So it's really just the communication that we need to like, hey, first of all, that user should have tokens because they use the card. And second of all, we need to make that like the bug is actually in the communication that we're giving the users there. Okay, great. Well, I mean, among the three of us, we figured that out. So that's good. On the team-wide announcement side, I mentioned the snapshot. Don't forget to put what did you ship when you do something for BCard. This includes when you test something, Sprinkles. So the fact that you tested it, maybe it only took 5 minutes, but that's 5 minutes that you can put in the what did you ship channel. So go ahead and put that stuff in right now if you like, because I think that is useful, and anything that's useful, we want to make sure that we recognize it. On the standard bounty side, card designs, articles, emails, and looking for people to start calling nonprofits. So go ahead and check it out if you have those standard bounties. And if there's other things that you want to do, feel free to do them as well. We are in a position where literally almost anything you can do is valuable and valid for us. So feel free to follow your desires as well. Sprinkles, I know I didn't add you to the GitHub yet. So I will give you access to that today, knock on wood, so that you can put pull requests in. And I don't know if you've done pull requests before, but basically you're going to have to fork the repository and requests to push your code in afterwards. But I'll try to get that up and running for you today.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. On the milestones perspective, 10 weekly transacting users. We have a couple of open bugs to fix. Looks like the bug related to voting is related potentially to that user not having tokens. Now, on the upside, that user does have tokens now because they reported that bug and we dropped them tokens a couple weeks ago. So they do have tokens now. So for that user, at least it shouldn't be a big issue. We want to show this in the UI. So that's something that we could do with the error message, I think. 10 new users a week, community pages. I did get some progress on voting. I moved some components over and I got it to compile. I migrated a backend function from BCard to our transaction server, which is going to kind of turn into, I think, our monolith API, which we'll use for these community sites. And the next step on this is really to get it fully working, which I'm hoping to do today. At least I'm going to work on it today, and we'll see how far I get. And then the next step after that will be to refactor it to its kind of smallest possible state so we can use it across multiple sites. I think right now it's like really tuned towards the BCard app. And what we really want to do is kind of really kind of like have a strong boundary on this. Essentially, that whole widget framework that if you remember the if you remember the wireframes that we did, the idea that any community can create a widget. We just want to really like widgetize it so that you can include it and maybe just like put in a URL for your snapshot space if you're a community that uses snapshot. So the idea will be to like, I'll use that word widgetize, but because I feel like that captures it. But yeah, does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does make sense, and I've said the word widgetize in my head like 3 times now since you said it. So
Okay.
yeah, it makes sense.
Sounds good to me. Make it
Cool.
modular.
Exactly. And I think another thing that's great about making it modular is that like if anyone wants to then create like a little module, it's kind of like, okay, well, this is how we did it for the snapshot vote. Hey, if you want to make a POAP module or if you want to make like an endowment fund module, this is kind of how you do it. Like we have a little configuration, we do the X, we do Y. Anyways, we'll see. But I think that's the kind of idea around it. And then after voting, it is time to get the endowment fund working. So really deposit and withdraw using our Privy wallet, and then potentially deposit withdraw using Farcaster Mini app, and then potentially deposit withdraw using ACH, and then eventually potentially deposit withdraw using a credit card, right? So these are all things that we can do to increase the surface area for any kind of community, especially if we start adding into that deposit withdraw, hey, you deposited, your Privy wallet now has these tokens which show you deposited. Oh, that means that you're a member, right? Or you're a certain kind of member because you've deposited X or Y. So we're then going to get into that whole idea of like, hey, we're able to kind of see your membership based upon the status of your Privy wallet, which I think would be kind of interesting and neat because hopefully your Privy wallet. So that's the first thing is like deposit. Hey, you've deposited. There's stuff in your Privy wallet. But imagine in the future if it's also stuff like, hey, you attended an event and you got a POAP. So you're a different kind of member, or maybe you have to at least attend an event to become like a regular member. Anyways, all this to say that that kind of endowment fund part of it that hopefully can can infect and enhance that kind of voting widget too. Make sense?
Yes, indeed.
Si, senor.
Awesome. Oh, right. So for in-app voting, I already mentioned our August vote. Please go ahead and vote if you haven't. On the Nouns prop, I'm really just trying to get enough sponsors to get it on chain and expecting it to fail now. Our main kind of whale sponsor has kind of ghosted me, so I don't know. Maybe that's a Gen Z thing. I would just tell someone if I didn't want to continue to sponsor their prop, but I don't know. Maybe he's got something going on in his life as well, so I'm not quite sure. Either way, I just want to get it on chain so we can get a yes or no, and I can spend my time on more satisfying things. All right, 10 high quality communities. Well, I don't see Arcusty here. Historical accounting and blog post on the system that we're using. Well, I'm assuming there's no progress there. Hop into Asana on the task perspective, but I think it's mainly the things that we've already talked about. I mean, now that Tom's here, maybe we can close off this one bug here, tracing a login hang for Homie. I think this is done. Tom, I mean, would you agree?
Well, as we know, nothing's ever totally done, but I think that bug is certainly resolved.
Okay, cool.
I mean, like the refactor was a success, but there's always more to refactor.
Cool. All right, I will mark this as complete. And then community page is milestone 1. So snapshot voting on the community pages. Actually, I think this is me who's doing this. I'm going to assign it to myself. And then there's this idea of a chatter widget as well, which is like essentially just like looking at the Black Flag Farcaster feed and making a wireframe for the badges widget is on there. I'm going to throw the endowment fund deposit withdraw widget. I'll stick that there for now, and we can move on from there. But yeah, I think this is on. May as well just add it to myself, actually. For me, like the milestone 1 is achieved when we get voting working, and we get the ability for us to deposit and withdraw from the endowment fund on the site. in a widgetized way. That's kind of the first milestone. Does that seem correct to everyone? Then we can start breaking it up into smaller groups, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, cool. Making it easy for you for us to get tokens of contributors. The last thing here is historical accounting, Black Flag Endowment Fund. Honestly, these probably should be this should be with community pages milestone, but we'll put it here for now. And then using tokens to increase contributor volunteer increase contribution of volunteer organization. That's an article that we're supposed to write, but we shall see. Anyways, looking at what we shipped last week, I applied for Braille on-ramps. Actually, I didn't follow up since then, but essentially there's bridge on-ramps and there's Braille on-ramps. They're two different things. They actually have two different kinds of ways to do it. I wanted to sign up for Braille on-ramping as well because Braille is a smaller team. Hopefully they can, hopefully we may be able to get a little bit better support from them, but yeah. So 500 BCard for that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
All right. I also moved snapshot and dependent components to community pages code base. It's not fully tested, but I also deployed a snapshot API function to the staging server. So that's 2500 BCard. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. I also prepped and held this week's all hands. So that's 2000 BCard. Arcus entered contributor rewards for week 38 into splits. That took him 50 minutes, so that's 250 BCard. I held the ops meet, we just did 15 minutes this time, 250 BCard. I also sent out contributor rewards, that's 250 BCard. And finally, I posted on socials and talked to our announced stakeholders, another 250 BCard. All right, anything else that we did that we want to include here? For instance, sprinkles that you tested the thing?
Sure.
And Tom tested the voting. Did you also test the voting, NF Thinker?
No, I did not test the voting.
Okay. 5 mins, what is that in BCard? That's 1,000 divided by, what is 5 divided by 60? You know what? Divided by 60. It's like what? 166? Let's just say 150 BCard. Okay, cool. All right, discussion items. So I'm open to what we discussed today, but one of the things I was thinking about is censorship, because it seems like lately we've had a lot of kind of censorship kind of things happen in the United States, but these are very overt. There are also some kind of more insidious and hard to see censorship activities, and I think that if we do community pages right, and we're trying to build it with some sort of censorship resistant technologies, it's something that in the long run, if this gets worse, it's something that may be a potential value to other people. But yeah, that's what I was thinking in my head. Any other kinds of discussion topics that you guys want to discuss?
I guess that's long been the promise of the blockchain, right? In that it's an uncensorable platform for distribution or transmission of all sorts of things, messaging and whatever these days. Initially, value, I suppose, but yeah, I think that certainly in our world, having the ability to send things out permissionlessly or whatever, and have it be a permanent record is a powerful mechanism.
I agree, it's powerful, and I also think that, so let's say, for instance, if you talk about like the freedom to transact, like the uncensorable freedom to transact, well, actually, anyone who used Tornado Cash is now on an OFAC watch list, right? And you can't, like, anyone who used Tornado Cash or anyone who interacted with someone who used Tornado Cash is essentially like unable to remove their funds from blockchain.
It's
which
been
is
made retroactively illegal right?
Yeah.
These actions that were meant to be sort of open and permissionless and like we can do what we want to do or whatever, was later deemed to be a dangerous threat, apparently to society, that you could do that. So
Yeah. So it's just like it's effective censorship, right? And I think that these are the kinds of things that are when I said like these kind of like more hidden, more insidious things, like yes, you can transact on the blockchain, but if you want to transact privately, all of a sudden that becomes like a lot more problematic. Recently, there was someone I know who was working on a private blockchain called Equilibrium, and they just had tons of difficulty getting any kind of funding ever. Why? Probably because they're working on a private blockchain, right? And I think that there are some like quote unquote private blockchains that may or may not exist, but like those are all closed source private blockchains. So are they really private? Could it be that they're not actually private and that they're just essentially like a honeypot for these kinds of transactions? So I think like sometimes we think that we are uncensored, and yet we we may be censored without even knowing it. And I think that that is especially true of things like media, where I mean, for instance, like let's use Charlie Kirk as an example because people use him as a person who was all about free speech. It's true he was out there, and he was engaging with people, and he was engaging people in real time, right? Like on college campuses, anyone could kind of could kind of like record him, and so like you look at him as someone who's interested in free speech, even if the things that he was saying were, maybe not very attractive to a lot of people, myself included. I think that like the idea that he should be allowed to say what he wants is really part of part of his message that he was saying. And typically, the people who are saying things that other people don't want to hear are more interested in free speech as well. But if you look at the response to what he was saying, all of a sudden, people are using it as a reason to crack down on free speech. So we don't need speech that is that free. Or even if you look at Charlie Kirk himself, when it came down to things like the Epstein files, and I guess I don't want to go too down into conspiracy theories and stuff like that, but like he himself kind of was very interested in seeing what's in the Epstein files, and then when there was a chance to kind of see them, he basically said, "No, I don't think we should see them. I think that the administration can just do what they want, right?" And so, free speech is not a simple matter. Even people who are really big proponents of free speech, when you look at certain kinds of speech, they may think that that's dangerous or inflammatory. And there are limits to free speech as well. Like you cannot, I mean, hate speech is covered under free speech in the United States, but in Canada, you cannot, like hate speech is not covered under free speech. So you can actually get sued or arrested for spreading hate or inciting violence, right? And so I think that that idea of censorship as well, like, is that censorship to say that like you can't incite violence because free speech is free, right? Um, Anyways, this is something I'm thinking about lately. I don't have an answer for you. It's all very complicated and it's all very timely right now because people are talking about it. I guess I wondered, what do you think?
I think something about the freedom of speech these days needs to be tied necessarily to sort of the level of amplification that's available. Voices can be amplified so broadly through the internet, through social media, whatever it is. I don't know if that means we all have sort of more responsibility to sort of be aware of the things that we say, but it does feel like sort of we're resetting the rules of free speech for a world in which we all have megaphones to broadcast. So something like, we gotta like we should be free to think what we want to think and say what we want to say, but then be cautious about how broadly that message can fly if we're not careful. Something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The fact that we're all able to kind of just yeet our words into the void of online, it really changes things. Because if free speech was kind of only constrained to the people that you see or the people that you know, um, then it was like kind of like different. But they say now that like anyone, no matter how crazy your opinion is, and maybe, or let's say not crazy, but how niche your opinion is, you can find someone else on the internet who feels the same way. You can look at like, the kind of whole flat earth conspiracy, which I would say that most scientists say is untrue. But there's a massive community online who says it's true, right? And so I think like 50 years ago, that would just not exist.
Yeah, it's almost like it's our sense making mechanism, right? In the sense that, like, if I have a crazy idea or whatever, I tell it to you, my close confidant, and you can tell me that it's a crazy idea and that I shouldn't go like shout that from the rooftops or whatever, and try to convince people of how truthful my crazy idea is. But if I don't have you to vet the idea through first, or whatever, a small trusted circle, or social community, however your sense making apparatus works, and you're using the public square as your sense making apparatus, I think that's the situation that we get into, or just like, if we're all figuring out truth in the public square, and people from an external viewpoint are looking in and seeing people discovering truth, assuming these people know everything, it's like there's a mismatch in terms of, are we trying to figure things out by saying the crazy ideas so we can talk about them, or are we trying to say only the ideas that we know are the good ones?
Yeah. Go ahead, Anna Ficker.
Yeah, very contentious subject, especially within my family. A lot of my family are very left leaning, and I would consider myself a centrist, which they would probably call me a Trump voter, even though I didn't vote, and I wouldn't have voted for Trump. I feel like there's a lot of confusion around freedom of speech. There's a lot of emotion around freedom of speech, and the only true way to cure bad speech is through verifiable facts. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with blockchain, right? You mint something online, and that is then that statement is then locked in forever. Where facts come in is that these things need to be verified. Anybody can make a statement that they sent tokens, etc., to a wallet, but if the tokens weren't sent, the tokens weren't sent. That's a fact. Where this becomes more nuanced is that in certain cases, facts are either changed before the truth gets out, or facts are hidden so the real truth can't get out, or the data, aka the data are massaged to create facts that fit a narrative. And there's a lot of talk about this in the vaccine industry now, and I don't know how much of it is, verifiable or not. But we did see it in the pharmaceutical industry with the Sackler family, right? You look at the opioid crisis that we had in the United States and other places. I'm sure Canada had its fair share of opiate addicts. But the Sackler family took data from their testing and lied. They were able to say that it was not addictive and that it was easy to come off of and that it didn't cause certain types of things that it was causing because they were able to massage that data. So it's really important when discussing what we can and can't say to also look at what the facts are. And where those facts come from, where the truth comes from. This is why personally I do not believe a single thing that I see on corporate media these days, because they will sit there and tell you about how safe the vaccines are, and then they'll say, brought to you by Pfizer. It's bought and paid for, so I can't trust those facts. It's a biased opinion in my opinion. That's a biased opinion. So there's a lot to consider. We've seen the creation and now the vilification of independent fact checkers. I don't know if anybody saw recently within the last few days that Google and Facebook, and I don't know who the other one was, have all admitted to caving to government pressure to censor and silence people online, both political and I guess what would it be called? Vaccine deniers, I suppose. Those are the people who are being silenced, and it's not necessarily for saying vaccines don't work, because not everybody thinks that vaccines don't work. Some people think that vaccines just need to be tested better, or that an mRNA vaccine was maybe not as safe as they made us believe it was, and that vaccine mandates were not required, and then shutting down mom and pop restaurants and shops while letting Target and Walmart stay open was a decision that was solely based on money that was forced by lobbyists for big companies. So we, as a nation and as a species, need to be able to talk about these things openly. So when Google censors somebody for asking questions, both Google and the people who have told Google to censor should be held accountable. And I think that's what we're starting to see more of. When it comes to the most recent events with, say, Jimmy Kimmel, that was an egregious abuse of power by the FCC, and Trump being Trump and just being the asshole that he is, and thinking he can always get his way all the time. I think he'll learn the hard way or the easy way, that it goes both ways. And this is another thing that I think is super important for people on the left to remember, because not too long ago, about a year ago, I believe it was John Kerry, if not another prominent politician, was saying that maybe the First Amendment needs to be removed. Maybe the First Amendment isn't protecting us. That, I believe, is total bullshit. And that, if you silence one side, the other side will quickly silence you as well. So I'm all for freedom of speech. I'm all for removing or reducing censorship, and I'm all for independent fact checking. When Brian Seltzer gets on CNN and tells me not to do my own research, well, I can guarantee you I'm going to do my own research. Anybody who tells you not to do your own research should not be trusted. So, yeah, those are just some of my thoughts.
Well, two things I wanted to pick up on from what you said. I do think it's really important for everyone to understand the power that they have in just the way that they spend their dollars, right? Like, that is one way of keeping people accountable. And I think it's just something that we often forget, right? Like, just the fact, I think that Jimmy Kimmel response was like, first, Disney did the calculus, or like, let's say Disney did the calculus on like, hey, we don't want to mess with this administration. It's going to cost us lots of money. Okay, Jimmy Kimmel's gone. But then when a bunch of people started to boycott Disney, Disney was like, did a new calculus, and they said, hey, it's going to cost us more money to cave. So let's not cave anymore, right? And so, like, it worked essentially. The one thing you can always count on corporations to do is do what's in the benefit of their own profit. And so I think that sometimes people forget that even if you just feel like you're one person, but if you go ahead and do the thing like cancel your Disney Plus and whatever, even if you want to still consume Disney content, go ahead and pirate it or something. But the fact that you're taking money away from them that is a signal in and of itself. And I think it's something that we forget as people, that we have the power to do that, right? As long as those companies exist, at least in the consumer space, we can do something about it. So boycotts do work, and I think that that's something that we really need to remember as a people. Another thing I wanted to talk about, when you talk about facts and this kind of stuff, one of the things I said when Trump was elected the first time, or one of the things I insisted to people, is that we live in a post-truth society. You know, everyone, like I have a lot of cousins who are very pro-Trump, and we would discuss the facts together, and their recounting of the facts, like their verifiable facts, are different than mine, right? Because, like, you know, for instance, let's take something relatively benign. I'm not going to go and go count all the people who showed up at a speech, right? So I have to rely on someone else who actually did the count. So do I trust CNN or do I trust Fox News on how many people showed up to a Trump speech, right? Like these kinds of and I think at the time the press secretary called them alternative facts, right? But like this idea that that it's, you as an individual can't verify everything yourself. Therefore, you have to trust someone to tell you what is and isn't true. And also, like, adding to it, any opinion you have, you can go online and find someone who will give you the facts that support that opinion. To me, it just leads to this idea that we live in a post-truth society, and actually, what we need to do is not try to create more truth from that, like from first principles, but we need to create some other way to deal with this idea that facts are malleable. How do you feel about that? And I know, Sprinkles, you haven't spoken yet, and as someone who's actually living in the United States, you probably have a different, like, kind of cultural background for this stuff than Tom and I, and probably NF Thinker as well, even though NF Thinker is American. But yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about this idea that we live in a post-truth society, or anything else?
So honestly, I was thinking I was going to be just a listening participant this morning, and I took a gummy earlier.
Okay.
So I'm just going to
Yeah,
listen if that's okay.
rock
'cause
on, let's hear it.
I would sound dumber than usual if I didn't. So
I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, if you feel so inclined, you know, feel free to speak your truth, even if you feel like it might be incoherent or anything like that. Like, I think it's still a valuable perspective.
okay,
But don't feel like you have to either.
okay. What was the question?
The question is just, you know, how do you feel about censorship, especially with everything that's going on um, in the world lately?
Oh, so I'm a Trump fan. I know you guys aren't. So because I'll start there.
Yeah, that's
Um,
cool. It's great.
Yep. I mean, what censorship in like crypto and the blockchain? It's always I don't know, because exchanges and the wallets and even like web interfaces um, are all like they're all censored. They're all like not decentralized. They're all centralized. So it's not really going to change until that
Mhm.
changes, right?
Yes, I completely agree with you. It won't change until that changes.
So,
So I completely agree with you on that front, right? And it's one of the reasons I think, like with BCard specifically, it's kind of hard because there's all these centralized exchanges who kind of decides who can and cannot transact, right? I think it's really, um, it's something that, like, we can't change from where we are, right? Um, and so, as a Trump fan, I think, like, it's really important for us to be able to speak with each other. I guess, like, what are your? I mean, were you following the news with the whole Jimmy Kimmel thing? Like, did you,
it
like,
was,
when
and
he
that was
was
bullshit. Yeah, that was bullshit. That was an overuse of power, and it was crazy.
okay? And, like, but I guess, like, some people liken it back to when Tucker Carlson got fired from Fox News, and I don't know if you were aware of that, but, like, did you feel like it was different, the same?
Um, no, I mean Tucker Carlson got fired because of freedom of speech. So it seems the same, but it wasn't, right?
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. And how
But yeah,
far do you think free speech? Go ahead.
It all boils down to them saying what they wanted to and just being on air, going against probably what the media wanted them to say. In both scenarios.
Exactly.
I think at the end of the day, we have to ask, like, who's the boss of these people that are getting fired? Is it the public? Because they're public figures, whatever, doing news, entertainment, whatever it is. Are we their bosses? Is the government their bosses? Is the government's like bureaucracy their bosses? It's very unusual to think about in the long run, but maybe going to a more decentralized model of media like YouTube is the end result if they can keep the censorship off of it. I don't know.
Well,
Something like that.
I think that's really interesting because it actually really goes to that whole example of Tucker Carlson, right? Like before, Fox News was his boss, and the things that he was saying before versus the things that he's saying now, as he's more of like an independent media person, you'll notice that there's like a big difference in the way that he talks, in the things that he says, in the opinions that he has.
Do
Like
you
for
think he's
instance, this
unleashed, or do you think he's like more thoughtful? I don't. I'm not really sure. I don't have the context.
I think in general, like for instance, like this free speech issue, like on the Jimmy Kimmel issue, who's just like, yeah, this is censorship, right? And he didn't. He was someone who came out and said like, yeah, this is an overreach of the government. And I would say that like Tucker Carlson right now is espousing more kind of like traditional United States right values, free speech, and like let's say isolationism, which is like something that I think is a more traditional right United States thing
So
versus
he's like
um,
more hardcore in his beliefs now that he's like been fired. That's the idea.
yeah, I would say that like if he was still working at Fox News, he wouldn't have come out against Jimmy Kimmel. I suspect that. Whereas right now he's on YouTube and he's got his own podcast and he's got his own website and these kinds of things. Like it enables him to, I think, speak more true to himself. I don't know. I don't know the guy, right? But like I suspect that that's true.
Or at least he's choosing whatever he feels is like the most entertaining style for his goals, right? Whether that's
Yeah.
like rile up people or achieve big audience or whatever. I'm sure there's like make a bunch of cash. It's all sort of part and parcel, I guess, with whatever the playbook is that he's choosing, right?
That's a really good point too, right? Because when he's getting paid by Fox News, he doesn't really get to choose as much what he's saying. He says what Fox News wants him to say, and like usually he's saying the things that he knows Fox News wants him to say. But when he's on YouTube, he's got to say the things that gets people that gets people to subscribe and watch him, which means that it necessarily, because it's on social media, it necessarily has to include conflict often, right? Like it has to incite some sort um of of emotion. And I think Charlie Kirk was the same way, right? Like often he was saying things to elicit emotion in people. And he could have said it in a different way, but if he did that, he wouldn't have been as popular. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I think that that's the game, and people who are good at playing the game, they get more popular. If that's the game that you want to play, then that's the game that you have to play if you're going to be like a media personality, right? But I think it goes back to that point that it's a different kind of censorship. It's a systemic censorship versus like something that's a little bit more overt. Hey, Rupert Murdoch doesn't like what you're saying, you're fired, right? Like I think like that, the idea that our media landscape um, is kind of like um, ultimately censored, I think is I mean, I think it's absolutely true, and it's actually accelerating. If you look at all of the mergers that are going through in the United States, like the consolidation of media is massive, and it's not just in the United States; it's everywhere. In Canada, we always only had like far fewer independent media than the United States, but even now, if you look at the media landscape, like it's mainly like two or three big owners who own all of the media mouthpieces, like across the entire country. And so there is a censorship that exists in there. It's something that Donald Trump brings up a lot, and I think that he's right that there is an inherent censorship that that exists in traditional
Yeah,
media. Now he says it
I
in a
think
very
yeah,
bombastic way, right?
you're right. Maybe this does go back to the argument, like of lending more power to your idea of the boycott of the people having, power over what it is. It's like we can certainly boycott against like old institutions of media by not watching them and by tuning into social media and by even further, like, choosing to watch Tucker Carlson or not watch Tucker Carlson, depending on whatever our viewpoints are. And perhaps in a way that sort of like selection by the public will, in a direct or indirect way, as we were saying, influence what it is that the media people will say, and at least in some way, perhaps more reflect the views of the broader public than it was when the mainstream media sort of like had the views filtered from a figure ahead at the top of the pyramid, or even like a governmental oversight board or whatever overseeing the whole pyramid structure, right? So it's like maybe there's some hope of that in the decentralized nature of media coming out. So
And I think one thing that's really interesting about it is like, okay, so we have this kind of like tradfi like media, and there's a certain kind of censorship. But when you move over to social media like YouTube or X or something, there's a different kind of censorship, and it's a different kind of like systemic censorship, right? And that's kind of if we take one more step into decentralized media, I think like, okay, in one case, uh, uh, you're getting paid like when you look at like trad media, you're getting paid by a person or like a company. You're getting paid from one source. When you move over to YouTube and like Spotify and other things, you're getting paid from one source, but it's based upon your audience. And then I think that if we move over into completely decentralized media, the thing that I think would be really interesting here is you are getting paid directly by your audience and listeners. And that I think would change things again, because it means that hopefully you can make a living with a direct connection of less people, right? Of fewer people. You don't have to, like, I think on Spotify, it's like you need an audience of 15 million people to be able to make like not a decent living, but to make a living where you can actually pay your rent and eat and stuff like that. It's not like you're rich, but you can make a living with 15 million people. I think it's much lower on YouTube. It's probably like hundreds of thousands of people, and you could be doing very well with hundreds of thousands of people on YouTube. And then in if we look at like a decentralized media where you are getting paid directly from people, could it be that you're able to make a living off of just like a couple hundred people, right? Like if that's the case, um, then I think we may have less censorship. Of course, more creators, more media, more niches, that kind of thing as well, which good or bad depending on your thing. But I do think that spectrum of censorship changes as the source of money changes. Does that make sense?
yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that you're right to say that, like, if you started out that you can make it a go of it with a smaller audience or whatever, then naturally, I think those voices that deserve a bigger audience will earn it over time, right? And that's the beauty of being in public and having it be available or whatever, is that hopefully word of mouth ends up being the growth factor or growth medium, whatever, that makes it all work in the end.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. We hope, right? Like there has to be like we're moving from a system where a couple of people can kind of decide what you do and don't see, to a system where I guess like social media that kind of promises more people, like it's more the people who get to decide, but that's not entirely true because of algorithms. And then finally we get to hopefully a decentralized system where it really is about like how you it's kind of like more of a curation aspect. Hey, and if Thinker likes a certain podcaster and he's like, hey, you should check it out, links, and I do, and I start paying for it, and other kinds of things. That could really change the way that we consume media. It could really change the way that we, I guess, our relationship with media, and it could really change the idea of censorship too, because it could create more openness. Anyways, I'm not quite sure, but it could create a moderating effect too.
Yeah, the vote with your dollars concept does hold a lot of weight, and we've seen that in loads of different ways. Like, for example, corporations adding the LGBTQ flag to their logo during Pride Month, but only doing so in Western countries, not doing the same thing in Saudi Arabia. Because if they'd done that in Saudi Arabia, they certainly would have voted with their dollars. And it also shows how corporations will bend to a narrative to keep customers. There seems to be a conflict between both supporting LGBTQ in countries where it is accepted and not supporting it in countries where it isn't. You would almost, if they really cared, they'd have done the opposite and put an LGBTQ flag in their logo in Qatar, right? But that wasn't going to happen. So it's a powerful way to guarantee free speech in the future, and it also is extremely important to let people know that is a way that we can change things without violence, without censoring and silencing people.
What's a powerful way to ensure free speech? Is vote with your dollars?
Yes. Yeah. Ensure free. Yeah. Vote with your dollars so you can, show these corporations that, you're not interested in the lies that they're spewing or where their money comes from or where their money goes to support. Yeah, it is very powerful.
One thing I think related to that as well is like, imagine we have like pure free speech. Anyone can say anything. And we have this kind of like social media where like it's a public square. You can say anything. All of a sudden, I think like right now, that you said like Meta and Google, they kind of admitted that they were forced by the government to stop certain things or like censoring certain topics or that kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
And so in a world where we have that completely free exchange of information, so like the way that I wrote it down here in the notes is a dumb pipe, which is like a concept related to net neutrality or common carriers for phone traffic. I think in that world, the idea of curation becomes so much more important because, like, honestly, I don't want to see death in my social media feed. I don't want to see pornography in my social media feed. If I wanted to access that kind of network, like let's say a network like Farcaster, and there are death and pornography that I don't want to access, then I think I would potentially pay for a let's say sanitized feed for myself. And then what if you have this common network that's everyone's using, and you're paying for access to that network, like I guess like we did in the earlier phase of the internet or the earlier phase of the phone network, then it's all about that kind of curative aspect. So hey, imagine Google is has a product that allows you to access the Farcaster network, and then Google does censor something. Then you can be like, I don't want to use Google anymore. I'm going to move over to Coinbase's Farcaster client or something instead, right? And so like this idea that there's this kind of common network that people are pulling from, then that kind of idea of being able to curate these things becomes very interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole reason behind having Farcaster, the protocol, and what was Warpcast, the app. You can get all the spam you want directly from Farcaster, the protocol. I don't know that any apps out there were actually serving it up. But anytime somebody casts on Warpcast, it goes out to the Farcaster protocol, and Warpcast, aka now Farcaster, was the one censoring and serving up. They curate your algorithm for you. Luckily, they give you ways to curate your own algorithm now that you can, in a sense, upvote, downvote certain content. The more you interact with something, you're going to be upvoting that. And I think there's a way that you can say, don't want to see this anymore. X is now introducing a similar thing. You can now get less of something in your content feed, and you can also do that by setting your preferences. So it's a way to kind of self bubble wrap, right? You protect yourself from the things you don't want to see by adjusting your algorithm. Also, there might be instances where the stuff you don't want to see does come up to the surface, and that's when you report it, or that's when you vote it down. There's definitely ways to curate for sure. I just wish that our corporate media had a similar way to do it, because just jumping back onto the whole difference between Tucker and Jimmy thing. Jimmy was basically let go because the FCC chairman went on a podcast and said they better watch out. And the people who do the distribution, like something Star Network or something like that, they distribute all that content for CBS or ABC or whoever, for Disney. And they decided to pull the Jimmy Kimmels from their distribution. And then Disney followed suit by saying, Jimmy, you're out. Now, that's a direct flow from Trump to the FCC chairman to the business. Uh, as far as I know, Tucker Carlson was fired because Fox disagreed with what he was saying, and that's the difference between your mayor firing you or your boss, your actual boss, firing you for something that you don't like. If your values don't align with the business you're working in, then the business should have the right to fire you, and you can go out and you can execute your right to free speech elsewhere.
Yep, completely agree. Anyways, I see that we're at time. So I just want to say thanks to all of you as well. I appreciate that we can have these discussions with lots of different viewpoints. I think like when we're looking at the media and when we're looking at social media in particular, I think it's like, literally if I go looking for censorship, and I search for it, or if I look for it in my feed, I'm literally gonna get the most, let's say, bombastic opinions. The most like insightful opinions are hiding, right? Like what they want is they want to serve me up an opinion that is going to make me mad, or is going to, yeah, essentially that, right? And so I appreciate that we have this space where we can talk about some of these things, because it does affect what we're building, but we can talk about these things in an open and respectful way, which I think I just can't get from most social media. So I just want to say that I really appreciate this space. I really want to be able to take some of the things we're talking about and use it in the things that we're building. I mean, we're already doing some of it on the website, but I think like we could definitely be doing more. But these are the kinds of values that we want to align on as a team, because I think that it's going to affect how we build things. So that's why we have this discussion, and it's only possible if we're able to speak with each other in this way. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here, contributing, and allowing us to have these discussions, because it's not nothing. It is something that I appreciate, and it's something that's not available everywhere.
Yeah. Thanks for being our sanity board for all the crazy ideas, everybody.
Yeah. Appreciate you all. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate you. See you later.
That's soon.